Video address of His Holiness Pope Jacobus Primo on the situation of the true Catholic Church, that the present situation is such, as the main persecutor of the genuine Roman Catholic Church is none other but Satan himself, using all kinds of evil tactics and strategies to continue his useless attempt to destroy the true divine institution Roman Catholic Church, of which, this bride of Christ our Lord, we have been made its unworthy, supreme pastor. There is no mistake that such evils have befallen this true and only Church, and therefore being mindful of our exalted duty to our Lord, we do raise our voice, and once again, in order to warn this wicked world that the time of the open persecution from the devil's servant the godless Antichrist and his communist cohorts is nearly at hand, and that, we, as our duty towards God dictates, irrefutably do denounce this fact and signs of this communist atheistic evil coming, to those who still sincerely desire to save their souls for God and all eternity. This is the present subject of our video address to this world, which, we are convinced by painful experience, will mostly remain unheeded, and therefore the subsequent teaching consequences will ensue from such scandalous mistrust on part of the world's populace when it learns the price of unbelief through these such evils, coming up. The communist arch-criminal
Mikhail Gorbachev,
about the ongoing, unchanged, and to this day continual communist strategy against the true Catholic Church, in his 1987 speech to the Russian communist military in Uzbekistan, quote, "There must be no let-up in the war against religion, because as long as religion exists, communism cannot prevail. We must intensify the obliteration of all religions wherever they being practiced and taught." The evident proof of this Russian communist KGB deception of, quote, "the miraculous conversion," unquote, of Russia back into the Catholic religion, as it is evident that if such conversion was genuine and truly from God, the Russian Patriarch would have most certainly instructed Putin not to have anything to do with this Vatican in sacrilege occupying neo-Protestant apostate sect Novus Ordo, the sect of the devil, the sect of nothing but common criminals and thieves, which leads millions of souls into hell from its beginning since the time of the enemy of the Church John 23 Roncalli and Montini, both with communist connections, Montini directly with Stalin, and their willful perversion and intended destruction of the Catholic priesthood and episcopate, the 1962 and 1968 heretical and invalid change of the divinely instituted sacrament of holy orders. These apostate servants of Satan, including this layman and sacrilegious impostor and apostate sectarian with communist connections Jorge Bergoglio, have robbed the Catholic Church of nearly all the worldwide property, the Vatican included, and are actively professing sacrilege and idolatry, driving millions of souls away from any desire to save their souls and to become truly Catholic, and have connections with Russian and other such communist criminals, who have orchestrated this long-term communist strategy in the first place, and now are mocking God and His genuine Catholic Church, parading themselves as some kind of victors over the Church, which they have never been and never will be, and will themselves pay very dearly at the end to our Lord. But those who betrayed the Church and are involved with this horrible Novus Ordo apostate sect of Satan and the related heretics of SSPX, SSPXMC, SSPV, and or the Sedevacantist heretics, such perverted souls, if unrepentant, will one day find themselves in one of the various communist, quote, re-education camps, unquote, either in Siberia, or communist Venezuela, or China, and so on, as their punishment from God for their obstinacy to the truth and rejection of His true Roman Catholic Church will be thus executed, or worse.
So today we'd like to speak on the subject of the present danger to the salvation of the human soul and the situation of the Church, Holy Mother Roman Catholic Church. And because the arch enemy, the devil himself, is striving to destroy everybody's soul, and the mindset of the mankind is on the hedonistic pleasures, and in terms of the eternal salvation, this is not even resonating anymore at all. And very few people actually understand how that we have to work out our own salvation. And St. Paul says it with fear and trembling, which implies and shows that it's not easy task. And it's not like the sectarians, the Protestants and so forth, who are so confident that they, just because they believe, they will save their soul. But that's not the case. Because otherwise that would be very simple, very easy. Just by believing doesn't mean that they are dispensed from what they need to perform in front of God. Because we all will be standing in front of the judgment seat of Christ our Lord, and be responsible for our works, what we have done while in the body. But because of the level of apostasy in this world, and because people don't take care how they conduct themselves, and that they disregard that what the divine command is, that the obligation of every human soul is to learn the revealed faith, which is nothing else but Catholic tradition. And if people learn something else, that's automatically heretical, and therefore there's no chance of salvation. To be a member of non-Catholic sect that uses the name of Catholic is not leading to salvation. Impossible. And it does not save the soul. Not one, no sort sectarian is in heaven. Period. So today, because of that, because of the level of apostasy, and because people think that they can just pick and choose what they will believe and what they will practice, and that they can pick and choose whether they will do evil or not in front of God. Because of that, the punishment is coming. And because there are people in this world who think that they can just simply dictate what the way of life should be, even though that's in terms of their establishing themselves on the face of the earth, how they will direct people, what they will propose, and ultimately, if they so choose, what they will enforce by their civil power, if they possess such civil power. Then when that is established in their mind, and then the strategy of their obtaining that civil power, then they are actually emboldened by the results and continue in those things. But without realizing truly that they, most of them are godless, let's put it this way. They are not capable of achieving anything, because once God is not part of it, without Him we can do nothing. Says, "Oh Lord, without me we can do nothing." That means that if people choose to be anti-Catholic elements and disregard the authority of the Church, which stands and remains forever, as established by our Lord, so it's a divinely granted authority, an awesome authority. If people disregard that authority, then they will not achieve anything good. There will automatically be evils in it, because God will not help them to achieve it. It belongs to Him to give. This principle is totally disregarded by these godless enemies of the Church, by communists, socialists, and so forth, by atheists. It is visible in their conduct, because then the fruits are always bringing in the bad results, because obviously God is not helping them to achieve anything good in that sense. Although there might be temporal good for time being, but in case of socialism and communism, that temporal being is very, very seldom. It's only the tyranny that ensues from those systems that were thoroughly condemned by the Church, by the Holy Mother Church a long time ago, by our predecessors of happy memory like Gregory XVI, or later on by Pius IX, and more recently in the 20th century by Pius XI in his encyclical Divini Redemptoris, where he condemned the atheistic communism. So there's no need to go through the details what the communism really establishes, but that the danger to salvation is represented in their very strategy of communism as such. And that by that very fact, that godlessness is the founding principle of communism as such, atheism, denial of the existence of God, which is thoroughly heretical. On that principle rests also adequately the results of communism, which is slavery, human misery, total loss of liberty of conscience, and the church is driven underground. And there is not a whole lot that the church is able to do in such societies. And in other words, the devil is in charge of such evil systems and the civil government, and once it is in hands of communists, there is nothing that can overturn it. Only God Himself. To show this more thoroughly is very simple, because the strategy itself of Russian Bolsheviks they have put in place is reflecting it. First of all, this was a proclamation of their one of the chief ideologues under Stalin, and later Khrushchev, I think, was his name was Khrushchev, and he reported that for communists there can never be peaceful coexistence of ideologies, which is plainly showing their militarism and the determination, full satanic determination to take over the world. Really, the pride of Satan is in those people, and they have no intention of doing anything good, only to establish their hedonistic, nihilistic system, which is thoroughly condemned by the Holy Mother Church. On that principle rests also all other statements of theirs, even though they are being hidden for time being, but like those of Gorbachev, we have demonstrated so many times, where he said in 1987 that there can be no let up in the war against religion, because as long as religion exists, their own communism cannot prevail. That's what he said. You can see it on the screen, so I'll put it up there. Those are confirmed statements, so these people have not hidden any of such things. So on that account, let us quote from the quotation from their one of their Bolshevik bosses from 1931, which was under Stalin, and he was actually the secretary of the Comintern, which is international organization set up by the Russian Bolsheviks to organize worldwide communist conspiracy and to bring about the total collapse of the free society and virtually to take over the world, which is active in the today in the structures and so forth to this day in that strategy and so forth. They never given up, otherwise you wouldn't have states like China and Russia and the rest of them existing really in their structure of the government and so forth. It would surely collapse, it would dissolve, and people would elect freely their own representatives and so forth. But this is surely outside the scope of our present publication, so we will read his name was Manuelski, 1931. This is the strategy that's being implemented today, but is actually in its final stage. And you can see that the comparison is very clear, and it's surely visible. This Manuelski said, "War to the hilt between communism and capitalism is unwinnable. Today, the communists are not strong enough to attack. Their time will come in 20 and 30 years. He uses the term our time, we for our purpose, not to quote them so that it cannot be implied to us. We use their time. The time of the communism will come in 20 or 30 years, as obviously extended for a longer period, but this is 1931. So, to win, the communists shall need the element of surprise. The bourgeoisie will have to be put to sleep. So the communists shall begin by launching the most spectacular peace movement on record. There will be electrifying overtures and unheard of concessions. The capitalist countries, stupid and decadent, will rejoice in their own destruction. As soon as their guard is down, the communists under Russia and China and so forth shall smash them with their clenched fist." There's notation here. It says, "The current edition of the Soviet Military Encyclopedia Anders Manuels give it an extraordinarily long write-up and photo. So this is not something that's coincidental and cannot possibly be, because then you wouldn't have the Novozorov sect connections with people like KGB criminal Putin, the long-term leader of Russia, and the Russians, they claimed that somehow there was conversion or something like that, in the sense of them becoming again Christians. That's not the truth at all, because then they wouldn't be with the Russian Orthodox, because they were virtually taken over by the KGB, by the Bolsheviks, which is that's a known fact, and is provable by just looking at the biographies of those people who are in charge today. But Gorbachev said in 1987, this communist arch-criminal, he said this in Uzbekistan to Soviet military forces: "There must be no let up in a war against religion," he said, "because as long as a religion exists," you can see it on the screen, "communism cannot prevail. The communists must intensify the obliteration of all religions where they are being practiced or taught." So this is their true objective, not some made up thing. This is something that because by that very fact that they do not believe in God, that they espouse atheism, and they want to enforce it by the arm of the state, which then it totally prevents the church from functioning, and the church is truly driven into the catacombs. The persecution is so bad and so evil, so tyrannical, that there's no chance of open practice. Impossible. To prove this very easily is visible in the history of what the church had to go through. For example, during the communist takeover of Spain in 1936, again organized by Stalin. And those were highly trained operatives of Stalin, agents who were reinserted after 18 months of very intensive training in Soviet Union back into Spain, and in order to organize communist militia and start persecuting and invading the government virtually. And then the government was already infiltrated by Stalin agents, and by electoral fraud they obtained the power, and that's always the civil power. And then they started persecuting and permitting mayhem, permitting destruction of churches, murders, things of that nature, to destabilize the country to the point when then they themselves supplied the solution, which is total communist takeover tyranny. In the case of Western countries, this is nearly close to be established, except that it's not yet openly visible. But that may be achieved by outside military intervention, especially from Russia, because they have very vast military power or nuclear blackmail. All they need to do is evaporate one of the countries in Europe and blackmail the rest of them to submission. And they have friendly people in the governments to begin with. Those are socialists. We are not ignorant of these facts. This is not conspiracy theory. This is how they achieved the power in Eastern Europe, how they took over vast territories, entire countries, in a strike of a pen, and under the watchful eye of Western countries, including the United States. They permitted these countries, including Poland, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, half of Germany, Hungary, and so forth, to fall into the orbit of the Soviet Bolsheviks. Means complete slavery. We're talking about millions and millions of people. But God, being watchful over these things, because those countries were mainly Catholic, saw how this truly evil has taken place, and now it is being repaid. because England is in bad shape, United States is in bad shape, and these are things that are not entirely unseen. It's just the punishment, because back then, which was very well established, we are not ignorant of the fact what took place in the United States, on the fact of how those who are still truly Catholic, like for example Senator Joseph McCarthy, who truly warned the American public about the dangers to the communism, that they haven't done anything for defending those countries that were left helpless to the Russian tanks. There was a short uprising in Hungary in 1956, which was crushed by tanks from Soviet Union under orders of Khrushchev, because obviously they saw that Hungary used to be part of the Austrian Empire. It was a Catholic country, although it was deteriorating after World War II, but still the church was still under Pope Pius XII, and so they were obedient and they wanted to be Catholic. The church had the power to educate the children and so forth. That was the main objective of the communists, to wrest the young generation away from the church, so that the souls would be brought up in anti-Catholic sentiments and false atheistic doctrines and so forth. And that was the outcome. Today, that's visible. But because of the Western countries, like those run under false foundation of those countries, including the United States, which is the principal foundation of the United States, is not based on Catholic principles. Therefore, obviously, the result will not be good, because the door for deviances from the revealed truth is already opened, and therefore the results are that things that are detrimental or destructive, rather, of salvation are permissible in such countries. They are not permissible in front of God, but they are permitted by those countries to be tolerated, to exist. But if the church is in charge, then the salvation of the soul takes precedent over establishing heaven on earth as they today are trying to establish, which means good economy, luxurious living, and so forth, instead of trying to secure their eternal salvation, which these countries are seriously neglecting. So on that foundation rests the rest of it, because the chain reaction follows. It is not possible to establish good liberty of conscience, and we should phrase it, a country that is founded on those principles, which are Catholic, when the principle of foundation of the country is, or when the government is forcing it upon the citizenry, are the principles of worldliness, hedonism, nihilistic philosophy, things of that nature that are totally opposed to the Catholic religion and teaching and doctrine of the Church. When that is established in the country is set for fall and ruin. This is what is visible today in the Western Europe and also in the United States and elsewhere. The pandemic of the Chinese virus that was spread deliberately, according to the intention of spreading it worldwide, is manifestly visible on part of the Chinese communists, because what they did was they protected their own territory, their own country, by isolating the city of Wuhan from being accessed and so forth. But international flights from Wuhan continued, which is visible. That's a known fact. This is nothing new. This is not conspiracy theory. This is visible by that very fact. We judge it as visible and manifestly so, that the intent to spread this virus, which was most definitely visible, that's again according to the reports that we have knowledge of, came out of, and the structure of that virus is visible that it is evidently man-made. Now, when you compare this to who these people are, that they truly intend evil and destruction of liberty of conscience in the world, that's their strategy, philosophy, and it's based on godlessness, based on atheism, then the devil takes over. This is his work. So therefore, that spread of the virus, it was biological weapon, and very potent, because we're talking about over 600,000 people who died in the United States alone, and worldwide we think the number is close to 3 million or over 3 million, which is therefore biological weapon intended for destruction of life. And it comes from the communists. If the countries of the West understood what the Church has condemned, that the Church has thoroughly, the Roman Catholic Church has thoroughly and long ago, talking about back to time of Gregory XVI, which is like 1840 something, and 1836 I think it was the Mirari was encyclical, which was the one that he used the term communism and condemned it and so forth. And then pluribus of Pius IX, of happy memory, our predecessor, and onward, Pius XI and so forth. Communism and socialism, those systems are thoroughly condemned, including the syllabus of Eros, as mentioned in Pius IX. The Roman Catholic Church has spoken on the subject. If people were truly Catholic and part of the legislative process and power in the government, then they would truly take that condemnation and use it in implementing sound laws of the countries protecting the citizenry from this atheistic plague. But because people have that door open, especially in those countries we have mentioned already, United States, England, or the Protestant countries, because they want to be liberated from the sweet yoke of our Lord, which means from the doctrine and direction of His Church, the true Catholic Church, because they don't want to have that safeguard, because they're rejecting it based on Luther heresies and Calvin heresies and so forth, which come ultimately from the mind of Satan. Then the door is already open. It cannot be shut. The only way to close the door is to renounce those heresies and to be reconciled with the Church. But that is today nearly undoable, because the Roman Catholic Church, in our person, we are in the catacombs, and therefore there is no possible reconciliation. And we are being persecuted by this world. That's what it is, because people don't want to help. People don't want to be truly Catholic. People think that it is okay to be as they are, and therefore the mindset is truly fixed on creating heaven on earth for themselves, to have good living. The blindness of the mind and intellect is therefore secured, because Satan takes over. They are actually controlled by him. They become his slaves, and such people are set to end up in hell. There's no other outcome but fires of hell at the end, and many of them don't even realize it, and many of them don't even want to hear it, and many of them are, if not all, because obviously they are slaves of Satan, are not capable of doing it, achieving such knowledge. It belongs to God to give. And those who are not willing to be truly Catholic, that they will never obtain it. They will not be, even if they obtained it by some reason or something, which is highly improbable, because it belongs to God to give. But let's say, for sake of argument, if they obtained that knowledge and understanding, they will still not be able to do anything about it, because God will not help them, because they are His enemies as heretics, apostates, atheists, and so forth. If that goes that far, obviously. So that's why the punishment of this world is imminent, because today we see the situation kind of developing in communist Cuba, for example, if we need to speak about this. Yet it's not understood properly, because that country was under communism for so long, and today the shortage of food, the misery, the lack of medical care and so forth, the government in charge of everything, those people are total slaves. They cannot say anything. They cannot voice their. There's no guidance of the church. Church is not permitted to function, and the sect has caused so much evil already. Anyway, the Novus Ordo sect. So that's not the Catholic Church. So those people are completely slaves. They are set to fall, and many of them joined the ranks of communists. So the country is totally developed in diabolical hell. It's a living hell. There's no other way to put it. It's a complete misery. Only those who are well off, who are part of the government ruling class, which is the Communist Party. And this is what they're planning for the whole world. This kind of system. Except, and in many countries it is visible, including, let's say, for example, is Venezuela. That's a remarkable case. Once prosperous country, once Catholic country. Today it's a misery, poverty. Only the government, which is run by communists, with Chinese and Russian connections and so forth, only those have good living, and they treat the rest of it as slaves. You disagree, you get either eliminated, or there's no liberty of conscience, in other words. And God forbid liberty of conscience, that is conscience of Catholic, which is not existence because of the damage done by this horrible Novus Ordo sect, which is not Catholic. But this is just to illustrate what is coming to the whole world. That was the message of Fatima to Our Lady, from Our Lady to Sister Lucia dos Santos. And Sister Lucia spoke about it. And we have spoken about this in another recording that speaks about it, how the communists truly attacked the church, and that she was most certainly martyred for the faith, and heretical impostor connected with Novus Ordo sect replaced her. A woman that is even visible, that's not Sister Lucia, visible, the structure of the faith is visible and so forth, but by that very conduct. So, and then by the heresies that this impostor woman was espousing and professing and publicly disseminating. So those who claim that communism has collapsed in the Soviet Union and Soviet bloc are deceiving the world. And it's a strategy of communism to deceive. And not one communist in Eastern Europe or Soviet Union went to jail, went to long-term prison, or was executed, which would be rightful sentence because of what have the damage they have caused in terms of first and most eternal salvation. They have sentenced by that tyranny millions and millions of souls to hell because there was no possible access to true sacraments. The church property was stolen. Communist agents invaded the church and were able to take over, so there was no possibility of genuine sacraments to be administered. The church was truly prevented from the work that needs to be done. Divine institution of the Roman Catholic Church was truly driven underground, and many priests were either murdered or persecuted, sentenced to long-term prison sentences and so forth. Or they had to escape if they had the chance to do it. So the church cannot function freely in such society, but that's the objective. That's the devil. That's what the guilt of communism is. Immense guilt. Destruction of the soul of the nation, of the especially in those countries that used to be Catholic, total destruction of chance of salvation. And also enslaving the citizens of those countries into total slaves. And then those who disagree, they end up in long-term hard labor prison camps. as it happened in the Soviet Union, and those who disagreed, they end up in Siberia for 10 years. Common sentence for virtually nothing. And or in Eastern Europe, there were political prisoners who ended up in places like uranium mines, where the survival, yes, for nuclear weapons, Russian nuclear weapons, where the survival rate was 10 years after they were, let's say, they were released or something like that, in that sense. Horrendous crimes against humanity, against the church itself were committed. They infested with their own agents Western educational system and are producing these kind of false theories in order to prevent the sound education, which is the only good education is Catholic education, truly Catholic education, not what the sect has produced or the heretics, to prevent that education from taking place. So they are indoctrinating children into horrendous unbelief. It's bad. But that's the objective of these Theodores, to permit the young generation to be educated and even in the mindset, to have the mindset fixed on eternal salvation, which means to be truly Catholic. Otherwise, even if they go to Protestant, that's the end, because there's no possibility of sound doctrine to exist, because that's all heresy. So that's today, but this is the punishment from God of those who disregard the authority of the Roman Catholic Church in our person. The keys to the kingdom of heaven belong to us by divine right and by divine establishment, by choice, what our Lord established in the church. And when those keys are disregarded, the power of the keys and the teaching authority which we do possess of the sovereign pontiff, and when that authority is denied or disregarded, when people mocking our office, when they mocking the stature and dignity we possess from God, then what they expect that will come. But it's already coming. It is almost here. Those things are not hidden. Those people, they infested the media, the communist agents, media, legislative power, military, for example. One of the who was very good was Catholic in the United States. That was in the 1950s, late 1940s. There was Senator McCarthy, whom they vilify today without even realizing that he was warning the country about what took place in Eastern Europe, how the Russians were taking one country after another under the watchful eye of people who were inside the State Department of the U.S. State Department, who were Stalin agents, truly committed communists, or the communist agents rather. They were careful not to be members of the party, but they were still espousing the following orders from Stalin. And McCarthy was exposing them all of a sudden, and when he was 49 years old, all of a sudden he was dead. How is that possible? So we're not espousing any conspiracy theories, but it's he himself was a judge, and during World War II he was a Marine, so he was not a person who took it lightly, and then he became senator from Wisconsin and started exposing them because he saw what was happening, and he was following the warnings from the church and not being obedient to it, because that was Pius XII and previously before him Pius XI, who have warned the world about the dangers of communism, what they're doing in Europe, what they did in Italy, what they did in Eastern Europe and so forth, how Stalin was spreading around all the plague, that is, through his agents who were already recruited in Western Europe and trying to cause this evil. And it's remarkable how many people were espousing it. There was a case which we have certain knowledge of, which was written about in let's say state of Michigan from 1920s, that a local police found their files, the communist files, and that they had these conspirators, communist conspirators, they were preparing to overthrow not only the state government, but subsequently the U.S. government. And there was enough data on that in those documents to convict every single one that was involved in it. 1920s, early 1920s. How they wanted to play the racial card, how they wanted to prey on the uneducated citizenry who have no understanding what it is, what kind of plague, satanic plague it is. It's like a cancer. Once they take hold of one institution, they are capable of bringing in secretly their agents to take over the whole thing, which implies to subverting entire governments into their plans, and then they control them, or using blackmail and those type of evil tools to try to establish take their foothold in the country, and then they slowly but surely, systematically take over the entire country. And in countries that are strongly anti-communist, or at least have the understanding of what communism is, they do it secretly. But then once they control these things, including government, then they start establishing their doctrine without, they don't even have to mention who they are, but that's what it is. It is not one remarkable example which we have observed from 2020 US elections, for example, is that the US Congress was capable of certifying something that there was at least objective doubt whether that is true or whether that is deception or lie. If those people, including, let's say, Protestant heretic who was vice president, his name was Mike Pence, who was presiding over that ceremony, who claimed to be Christian, if he had the love of the truth in him, he would not have it on his conscience to say that such results could be certified. When there is more voters, let's say, which we have observed and it was reported in the state of Pennsylvania, more people voted that they are actually registered voters. We are not stating this for the purpose to intrude into these matters, but to illustrate how deteriorating the situation is. That people actually are capable of certifying such results which they know are at least, or have objective doubt that are not true, those results. So you see, if these people were truly Christian, they would not be able to do that, because then they know, as warning from our Lord, they know that no liar can enter the kingdom of heaven. You are espousing a lie, you commit mortal sin. You violate the very essence of what God is. God is the truth. You cannot be espousing a lie willfully and deliberately as they did. You cannot certify election results when there is objective doubt that there is a serious problem with the voting, and that the visible discrepancies and things of that nature. Instead of investigating what it is and thoroughly investigating, punishing those who are involved in that deception, people just plainly say, "Well, we will just name this person in the White House as the president," but then the results are not what it is. It's not true. This is the essence of the deterioration of the Western society as such, and punishment from God. Punishment. Because when people are not capable of defending the structure of their government, are not capable of truly protecting at least the liberty of conscience, then they are enabling the evil of the persecution and tyranny, which is godlessness, communism, socialism, and so forth, means the time of the Antichrist to truly take hold and come. But obviously, it's got deeper background. It's truly that our Lord is not helping them to protect it, because they don't belong to him. They are heretics. And heretics cannot achieve any of this. It's impossible. To summarize this very quickly, they will succeed, these people, these evil enemies of the church, these communists, no matter how they call themselves today, Democrats, Socialists, whatever they call themselves. In the essence, they truly are for this. There's no honesty, there's no love of the truth in them. They do not wish to be Catholic. Those who claim to be Catholic are no sort of apostate sectarians. They are not members of the church, including this person in the White House today, and her name is Pelosi. And the Western Europe, that's the same equivalent. There's no possibility. They are all outside. The sound judgment and true doctrine and love of the truth is not in those people. They cannot help themselves. They are actually serving the devil, and many of them are in on it to begin with. One of the remarkable cases which we have certain knowledge of is the Chancellor of Germany. Her name is Angela Merkel. The problem with her is that, stated in her biography, she grew up in Eastern Germany, to which, as a child, she was brought from the American sector controlled by forces of the U.S. military. When the World War II ended, when they split Germany in half, and the Soviet sector, and which was another blunder of the Western democracies and so forth, to allow Stalin to take hold of such a vast territory of Eastern Europe and split Germany in half and so forth. So the father of the family, that's in Merkel's biography, took the family from the freedom and moved the family to Soviet bloc. What does it tell you about the background she grew up in? She's the Chancellor of Germany today. Her policies are socialism. The result, it's in her biography that she grew up as members of the socialist youth in the communist country. Then how we have forgotten the Apostolica, how she got back. We don't know exactly that, because we have to study it as far as seeing how she got into that place. But that doesn't change anything. Her philosophical background is not anti-communist. The policies, if she was opposing communism, she would strive to escape from East Germany to Western Germany, and then she would be thoroughly against such policies of socialism in Germany as it is. This Merkel, she's ruining the state. They are not happy in Germany about what's taking place. And Western Europe, consequently, is in the same mire as it is to begin with. But this is just to illustrate how deep it goes. It's not that the person is visibly communist, but the policies of the state are opposed to the sound doctrine of the church. And when the mindset is, when the citizenry is looking for economic benefits, and they are not coming because this country is being set for the takeover by the godless, by the Reds, by the Bolsheviks, virtually, by the communists, by socialists, and it's established like this. The state wants to dictate what kind of healthcare people use, which is not based on charity, which means it's not Catholic. It's based on government directive and legislative power, which they decide for you what you have, which is totally condemned by the church. That's impossible to have like this. They want to force people into their educational system, and they want to force on people their way of life, which means disregard for liberty of conscience, any kind of freedom there is, and finally establishing this kind of slavery. It's step-by-step systematic degradation of the society as it is, because the door is open and the church cannot possibly condemn these things because we are in the catacombs. Beware of this. This is serious time in the history of mankind and punishment from God because of the general apostasy of this world, how people are to his church, how people disregard what the church stands for, what the authority of the Roman Catholic Church is, and that is divine authority, possession of the keys to the kingdom of heaven, which belongs to us as the sovereign pontiff. And if people disregard this, then these, what they observe in their countries, that's the aftermath and punishment from God for these kind of denials and mockeries and how the church is treated. So this video address is necessary to be done as a final warning to this world that the devil will not stop. His time is up. He knows that. He will burn in hell, and those who serve him will burn there with him, those false prophets. And those who are enabling the devil to continue his evils, those who are not willing to help the church to continue her mission, divine mission, salvation of souls, those who do not wish to save their soul, which means that the only way you can save your soul is by being truly Catholic, then this is the punishment already visible. And when the light of the truth is missing, darkness and perversion and degradation of the soul is the only result. So to summarize this is very simple, because we already know the results. It is written in the Apocalypse that the church will be persecuted by the devil. That's what's taking place. When people don't want to help the church to continue her mission and to offer sacrifice to God, the holy sacrifice of the Mass upon the altar, then those people are not obedient to God. Divine law and precepts of the church says that the support of the church is required by God himself. And if people neglect that, then they are helping the devil to destroy souls. And that's not charity towards your neighbor. That's not charity to anybody, really. That's just saying we will have it our way. That's why the punishment is coming. All these insults, all these hardships we have to endure, and all those things that the church has to suffer because people are mocking us, or somehow they have the audacity to compare us to this horrible sect that has stolen the church property worldwide, including the Vatican, and uses it to conduct the criminal activity and perversion and false religion. So it's a non-Catholic sect. And when people are approached by that fact, by the state, by showing that this truth, essential truth, that they are neglecting on building upon it, to try to reject this sect, those who are recognizing this sect as the heretics of Society Sympathisant or Society Sympathisant to some extent, or the Sedes Countess heretics who deny that the keys are in rightful hands, that show the sovereign pontiff in our person is directing the church and is in possession of that authority. So such servants of Satan will pay to God dearly, but we are concerned about those who follow their false example, the deception. And when such people neglect to learn the truth, neglect to seek the truth, as our Lord says, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be opened to you. When they do that, when they neglect to do so, they are equally guilty, because then they say yes to the devil and no to God virtually. And that is very offensive to our Lord, that is insulting to his church, and God will repay it. The Holy Mother Church will continue, regardless what happens. We will continue. God is with us. He is not with anybody else. God is helping us, and He will help no matter how much we have to suffer and so forth. We are ready to suffer all these hardships and so forth. It's nothing new to us. It's just that we want to help people to save their soul, to realize that what kind of tyranny is coming. That this is not something new. We have spoken about the situation in Cuba, which was sidetracked a little bit, but we will finish this. Such things that are happening in such countries cannot be taken in face value. That country is totally communist, so therefore organization of such revolts is usually not that the citizens are scared to do something like this. So usually we have to be very careful not to fall for this, that this is something spontaneous. This is usually the work of the communists themselves to establish these seemingly opposing systems, opposing organizations in secret and so forth. But then the secret police has always had snitches all over the place. So this kind of situation in communist countries was thoroughly impossible to develop, because the people would know right away that they would be brought to jail. They would end up in jail or killed, and their families persecuted and so forth. So obviously they had no willingness to do any of this. And so what is happening in Cuba has to be very thoroughly observed, in a sense that it truly looks like that it was escalated or put in place by the communists themselves, by the secret police and so forth, in order to uncover those who may still be there opposing the people that would oppose them eventually, if there's any worse times and so forth, to bring them to lock them up, to bring them to jail, to bring them to long-term prison, to get rid of them, to kill them, to really exterminate them. So, and it's happening. The reaction of the government in Cuba is evidently visible. So, and there's no willingness on part of the free countries, like seemingly free, like the United States, to help that island to begin with. And they are no longer Catholic people anyway. They are brainwashed by communism. So it's a sad thing, but we have to be careful who these people are, actually. When we're talking about how many years, 60, 70 years under communism, the result is the entire generations are brainwashed in the educational system, and there's very few that retain the Catholic faith, and that only by the help of God, if that is the case. So obviously the church cannot function in such countries that are under the hands, in the hands of communists. Any kind of revolt like this, a protest or something like that, ordinary people who understand what communists are capable, they are slaves in their own country. They understand they are slaves. They know that not to join anything, because they know that most certainly the secret police would be watchful and they would lock them up. They will endanger their own families. They will choose. So the most prudent thing is not to be involved in any of this, because it will not result in it. Demonstration will not result in overturning the communist governments. The only thing that was ever successful against the communists was based on Catholic faith, defense of the church and defense of the Catholic faith, which is Catholic tradition, and that is called rightfully Holy Crusade. The first one in the 20th century was the Cristeros in Mexico in 1920s, which was successful and was about to take over the whole country. They were winning, with the exception that the communists made false and deceptive concessions to Pius XI, and Pius XI believed them because the knowledge of the evils of communism was not yet there. It was not the Pope himself, but he was deceived. And so he ordered the Cristeros to lay down their arms and because the church was finally allowed to function. So on that thing, the assertion was of the communist government was, which was not visibly declaring communism, but it was in the laws and so forth. The persecution of the church was there, and when those things were taken away, seemingly, then the Cristeros were laying down their arms. On that account, the government seized them and they were all slaughtered. Most of them were slaughtered, basically murdered, in Mexico. The second Holy Crusade was 1936 to 1939 Spanish Civil War, which was victorious, because Pius XI already knew what they are capable of. He blessed the crusade of General Franco. He was good Catholic. He was not Nazi. He was good Catholic. He rejected to help Hitler and Stalin and so forth. Stalin and Hitler had a pact before the World War II of non-intervention. So they had the same camp, National Socialism, which is condemned by the church, and Communism, which is condemned by the church. So these kind of things were condemned by the church. General Franco was a Catholic. Spain was Catholic mostly. The murders of 350,000 Catholics for just being Catholic, and nearly 6,000 priests priests and 13 bishops and godless religious in Spain is the proof of evil of communism. Desecration of nearly 20,000 churches, burning them down, reeling them, destroying them with bullets, taking of the roofs and so forth, and these kind of things. That's the proof of the hideousness and diabolical background of communism, the hatred for God and for His church. So, the only weapon against the communism is to be truly Catholic. The church will be protected. Those who don't want to be Catholic, those who want to join this sect, or the heretics espousing this sect, or protecting this sect and recognizing this sect, this Novozorov sect, which controls the Vatican and so forth, they will not obtain the help. They cannot be called martyrs. They will not be martyrs, even if they think they died for Christ our Lord, shed their blood, because they are heretics. Heretics are never martyrs. They have to renounce that and abjure that heresy. They have to be absolved of that heresy. Only those who are truly Catholic are martyrs, if they are martyrs for the faith. So such people burn in hell regardless of how they died, even if they thought that they died for Christ our Lord. That was always the doctrine of the church. So to summarize this, there's no salvation outside the true Catholic Church. There's absolutely no salvation without the practicing and professing thoroughly the Catholic faith, which is nothing else but Catholic tradition. It is the dogma divinely revealed outside the true Catholic Church and without the practice of the Catholic faith, which is nothing else but Catholic tradition. There's absolutely no salvation. All heretics, infidels, apostates, or enemies of the Church, socialists, communists, atheists, and so forth, they burn in hell and will burn in hell. And the Church of Christ, our Lord, the true Catholic Church, will remain. God will protect us because we are truly a divine institution. Those who are not with us are against God. Those who are not helping us, they are against our Lord. And they serve the devil. And God will repay it at the end. And make no mistake about it. And the evil times are here. Do not be one of those people, because then the end will be the fires of hell.